Hello, and welcome to part 5 of the Words of Jesus, Loving and Understanding the Beatitudes book chat series. I'm Ganel-Lyn Condie, the author of Words of Jesus. Thank you to Cedar Fort Publishing for your support on this book and your work in getting the word out about the words of Jesus. I feel like I could rename part 5 of this series, The Daughters, because the next 2 chapters that we're going to talk about, and we're getting towards the end of the book after part 5. We have one more part, 2 more chapters, and the book is done. I like to write books that are not overwhelming. I love it when non-readers say, I love your books. I don't love to read. I get overwhelmed or I get distracted, but I can read your books. I also love it when readers reach out and leave a review on Amazon or DM me on social media and share how the book has impacted, or they gift a book of mine to someone that they feel comes to their heart and mind. And I hope you'll do that. When I was considering these 2 chapters, blessed are they who are pure in heart and blessed are they who are peacemakers, it was easy. I knew exactly as I was mapping out this book who I wanted to exemplify and spotlight these Christ-like attributes, these principles that Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. It was easy. It was 2 daughters. One, a daughter of a dear friend, John Fossum, my previous co-host, who on Talk of Him, if you were a viewer and a fan of that weekly Come Follow Me show, and then my own daughters. So let's start with Blessed are they who are pure in heart. Chapter 8. Eight's my lucky number, by the way. Blessed are they who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. 3 Nephi 12:8. I start out this chapter with a personal tidbit. 30 years ago, I was diagnosed with a serious heart condition connected to my lupus diagnosis. And it's interesting to have something that can be life-threatening and painful, but felt only on the inside, because sometimes people can't see. They look at me and they're like, oh, you must be like perfectly healthy because look at you. And they think they can observe. And when you have a chronic illness, if you have one, you may understand that it's not as all obvious, it's just not. It's internal. And so ultimately, I think when we're talking about this beatitude of the pure in heart, it's not easily observed. It's I can feel my heart hurting and I know when it's doing better, but people outside watching me may not understand how I'm doing. And so I think it's the same with our spiritual and emotional state of heart. God is ultimately the best cardiologist. He is aware of how your heart is doing. So Jesus teaches this next beatitude about the purity of hearts with one of the most beautiful of all the blessings. Those who are pure in heart will see God. What? I don't know about you, but you don't need to convince me of trying to work on an attribute, an ability to see God because of how your heart becomes pure. I just think what a beautiful blessing. What more could we hope for or pray for or want or work towards than this? But how do you know if someone's heart is pure? I think when you use pain or energy level, that's how I kind of know how my heart condition is doing. But how do you know how your heart is doing? That outward observation is maybe not the best way. Instead, consider kindness, gratitude, the ability to see beauty in others signal where your heart's at. Maybe it's a grateful heart. For the purpose of the study and personal application of the Beatitudes, let's explore the scriptures for some examples of people who lived with kind and grateful hearts. And so I talk about during Christ's time those that had leprosy. And I talk about how Christ went around healing those that were struggling and maybe pushed away by religious leaders, and how sometimes there were those that were healed and weren't grateful. And then I share the story of Jesus talking about the one that came back and express that glory to him, that gratitude to him. And so I think for me, gratitude is a signal of where my heart is at, right? I just was so excited to talk to you about Rachel Fossum in this chapter. And I told my co-host John Fossum that I knew exactly. He had told me this story that I share in the book. And I was working on the book and it was just like perfect. I think we were prepping for the show one day. And he tells me this story about how Rachel, who he talked openly on the show about her being special needs and nonverbal. And how she just so easily loves others. But also, what is so beautiful about her is that Rachel is like, sees the beauty in herself. And I talk about this, that he shared with me. John shared this, and I'm going to read it because it's so beautiful. What really stands out to me is how much she loves herself, like genuinely and humbly loves herself, just the way she is. When she looks in the mirror, all she sees is her own beauty. Her teeth are crooked and sometimes has horrid teen acne, but she doesn't see it. All she sees is her beauty. She still has awareness about the type of hairstyle she wants and the clothes she wears, but she seems to be 100% satisfied and joyful about how she looks and who she is. She has perfectly innocent love for herself. The joy and purity that emanate from her because of that love are palpable. She extends the same grace to everyone. She doesn't see ugly. All she sees is beauty in everyone, including herself. Most of us can see beauty in others, but we choose to see ugly too. And most of us struggle with seeing ourselves as ugly or being discontent with who we are, but not Rachel. Isn't that so beautiful? I just was like, of course, what would change in the world if we were all more like Rachel? How would our hearts and homes be healed if we only saw beauty in ourselves and others? I just think there's not a better example of this purity of heart principle than in Rachel. And then I end the chapter with one of my favorite. It's the Victor Hugo quote that is also on my sister Meg's headstone. He penned, "To love another person is to see the face of God." Or in the words of the Sermon on the Mount, to appreciate and love another person, you will see the face of God. What a beautiful promise. Chapter 9, blessed are they who are peacemakers. I told you this part 5 is the daughter series, right? Or episode. Because verse 9 of 3rd Nephi 12, and blessed are all the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God, made me think about my own children and specifically my daughter. I feel like both of my children have taught me more than I could possibly teach them. My son is very creative. He has a passionate heart. He has taught me the power of resiliency, and he's generous. And my daughter, I think from the moment she was born, taught me what a peacemaker feels like, looks like, acts like. She is an example to me in being a peacemaker in everything she does. When there's stress or anything, she's currently serving a full-time mission. She shares the peace of Christ in the world. She picks up garbage wherever we go. She she's the one who tries to play fairly when we play board games. I cheat, and I will tell my family that I'm cheating, so it's not a surprise. She's the one that connects her friends and becomes the mom of the group. And she reminds me a lot of my sister Bonnie that I talked about in part 3 of mourning. And I just love that from the moment this little baby was born into our family, there was an immediate feeling of peace when I held her. I share at the end of this chapter that Brooklyn has been such an influence to me on how I interact specifically with other women. There's been a healing in my relationship with myself and with my heavenly mother and father because of my relationship being a mom. And she has helped me see a deeper connection with my heavenly mother, specifically that female connection and bond that comes between mothers and daughters. And I think we all have spiritual gifts. We all have superpowers. We each have a unique contribution in a family, in a workspace, in a community, in a ward. And I think it's important that we kind of celebrate the divinity in our diversity, that we're not all the same. And Brooklyn's definite ability to create peace wherever she's at is one of the Christ-like attributes that I think maybe isn't always praised. When we talked about meekness, I think it's obvious we live in a world where mercy and meekness and peacemaking, it's like, how do you get ahead and how do you win and how do you beat people and how do you, right? That's what we seem to celebrate in the world. And I love that Jesus says in verse 9 that we will be called his children because of this specific divine attribute, this characteristic. How important is peace to building his kingdom? If we really are disciples of Christ, then we have to be peacemakers in what we do. And that's not always easy. I end this chapter with, I've given you some areas to journal and ponder, but this one says, how do you wake up the Savior in your life to calm the storms? I tell the story of Jesus calming the storms, right? List 5 ways in which you have found connection with the Prince of Peace. So, how do you wake up that connection with God? It's there, but sometimes goes to sleep. And so when the storms are brewing, sometimes we want to fight back. We don't want to be the peacemaker. So, what are 5 ways in which you can increase your connection with God? One of the ways I do is I always have music playing. I have it turned off right now for this recording so that it doesn't interrupt, but I always have music playing. Sometimes I forget, I post on social media and there's always background music. That is a way in which I awaken a connection with God. I awaken Jesus in my life. Another thing I do is before I go to bed each night, I try to write down where I saw a miracle that day. Sometimes it's easy to just see the storms and not to see where the miracles are showing up. And I feel like that's another example to me with a daughter serving a mission that it's not easy. Sometimes you have companions that are hard, or areas that are hard, or situations that are hard. And I've watched her over the last 18 months teach me even more at a deeper, more mature level about being a peacemaker. When you're with a stranger that all of a sudden is your companion and you never knew them like a week before, and now 24 hours a day for at least 6 weeks of a transfer, you're going to be with this person. You're going to live with them. You're going to talk with them. You're going to work with them. You're going to pray with them. That's a lot of being stretched in being merciful and being a peacemaker. And she's definitely taught me that as she's served this mission. And so I hope these 2 daughters inspire you. I hope you can be a little more like Rachel and look in the mirror and see beauty and not criticize yourself so much. What would change in the world if we had that pure kind of heart and that lens? And the promise is, if we are more pure in heart, more grateful, more appreciative of ourselves and others, we're going to see God. And then where can we be a peacemaker, especially during an election year or when there's war playing out on the news headlines all across the world right now? It's easy to feel like the storms are brewing. That's when I think we have to hold on and grow even closer to God. We have to walk with Jesus in very specific ways: music, journaling, prayer, meditation, service, whatever it is that works for you. Walk with Jesus. If you know what that means, if you know, if you know my Walk with Jesus video, you know why I'm throwing that in there. That when we walk with Jesus, it changes our heart and it's powerful. And I invite you to consider being pure in heart in how you see yourself and be a peacemaker. Thanks for joining me. Join me for part 6, the final in this series, Words of Jesus, Loving and Understanding the Beatitudes.